Hey, are you guys ready for a story? Because I got a little story to tell. So sit down and settle down. They'll be over before you know it. When my kids were growing up, Kyle, Holly, Chuck, Heidi, Hannah, Dan, Wes, and Hope, when Grandma and I, when our kids were growing up, one thing we loved to do every year, we did it at least once a year, usually more than that, but we loved to do it every year. Everybody loved to do it every year, is we would take a trip to Kentucky. We loved to go to Kentucky, and it was so beautiful. We'd drive down through Ohio and then into Kentucky, and the hills would start to roll, and then down the Burt T. Combs Mountain Parkway into the mountains of eastern Kentucky, just a really beautiful mountain range. And in a little village called Campton is where Grandma grew up, and we go back to Campton, and Mama Banks, Mama Hatton, and the families were there. They would make us special food, and we would go around town and we would sing. They loved to hear us sing and tell stories, and sometimes they'd invite us to preach at the Baptist church. But there's one thing about Kentucky that all the kids remember, and it's what I wanted to tell you about today. And it is that in the mountains of Kentucky, in eastern Kentucky, in a little town called Winchester, not too far from where Grandma grew up, they bottle a special kind of soda pop. It's like a ginger ale. It's called Ale 8, and the locals, because of the way they talk, they call it Al 8. And it is a very sweet kind of ginger ale, kind of a citrusy ginger ale, but you could only get it down there. And it'd be in little green glass bottles, and it would always be served cold in little green glass bottles. You could only get it when you got down into Kentucky. So we'd be driving along in our van, and then finally we would be over the Ohio River and over the big bridge over the Ohio River, and then down through Kentucky into the Georgetown and the Lexington area. And then we'd stop at a gas station, maybe in Lexington or maybe in Winchester, and everybody would get their own cold Ale 8. And then there would be the kids all sitting around. They'd pop the lid off their cold Ale 8. Everybody would enjoy their first Ale 8. And then when they get down to Kentucky, to the little village of Campton, and they go to Mama Hatton's house. Mama lived in town, in a little house in town, and Mama Banks lived up on a hill, in a house up on a hill. But everybody would sit on the front porch, and folks would drive by, and they would wave, and they would greet you, and you would get an Ale 8, and they had this most comfortable lawn furniture on the porch, and you would sit on the porch and laugh and tell stories and talk with neighbors, and always you would have an icy cold Ale 8 in your hand when you're down there. I was thinking about that because sometimes it doesn't take much to be happy, just something real simple, maybe something different. And if you can learn to be happy with simple things, just as simple things, you can be happy all the time, because there are always simple things around that the Lord provides. You can't always go jet somewhere on a jet. You can't always go to Kings Island or Cedar Point. You can't always have something expensive. But there are simple things that you can enjoy, and you can be happy with simple things if you thank the Lord for them. And then when you remember back, you remember the big things, but you remember the simple things, maybe even more. So that's something to think about.